study in India. Remember, India was the place that the top students would come to study in. So just like today students flock to Ivy League in America, or they go to Oxford in England, or they go to Australia, India was the place where most of them aspired to send their children to study under the magnificent educational heritage. I have written 2 books, and this second book was written in 2021. It was launched in Bangalore in Institute of World Culture. My journey has been going on since then. This book is taking me to places all over the world. There is so much of inspiration in the topic itself, India's educational heritage, that I have spent the last month traveling in Gujarat, speaking at different universities. Then I was at IIT Dharwad. And in all these journeys, I am myself coming to learn a lot. I am meeting such amazing, towering intellectuals, and that is adding to my knowledge. So for that reason, I am very thankful I wrote this book, because I am learning so much. So India has an educational heritage without parallel. I can say this with conviction. So we have a very ancient tradition of formal, disciplined learning, which is difficult to find in other regions at the same time, when we were having this system of propagating knowledge. And there was this whole culture of the value attached to education, which is very special to India. And even today, when you see that Indian parents are pushing their children to get into Ivy League universities, to be at the top, and they are not happy if you get into some lower universities, all these things is coming from ancient times. It is not a phenomenon that started yesterday. Ancient times, thousands of years ago, also parents were pushing their children to get into Ujjain University, get into Nalanda, get into all these universities in India. So we have that culture of pursuing knowledge to the highest extent possible. And modern universities today are built on the intellectual foundations that were laid in India, in ancient India. So we have these amazing thinkers from India, such as Kanada, Sushruta, Charaka, Aryabhatta, Varahamihira, Brahmagupta, Bhaskaracharya, Panini, Patanjali, Pingala, Bharata. So many gurus from ancient India, they have laid the foundation of all the disciplines that we call knowledge today. The disciplines that are being taught in various universities. If you go back to the history of those subjects, whatever be it, engineering, maths, science, language, when you go back to the history of it, you will find that it leads back to Bharat. So science, medicine, math, language, art, music, philosophy, environmentalism, everything, knowledge that has flowed out from India and on which other people have built on it, and that has become modern knowledge. So this history of knowledge is something that we need to remember. It has been forgotten because it's being packaged as modern knowledge coming from different parts of the world. We forget our own contribution to it. Now, this is a map showing you the different centers of advanced education all over India. And I labored a lot over this. It took a lot of time because in the first book that I wrote, it had only some 20-30 centers. And after that, a lot of people wrote to me and said, you have not mentioned this university, that university. So I did a deeper study. And when I did my second book, I came to about almost 100 centers of ancient learning. If I may request you to not take pictures of this, but to actually buy the book which has all the information, it would be good. Because what would happen is people would just share it and then that's it. They will not be reading the context of all these centers. And I was surprised to find that almost every part of India was covered with higher educational centers. Travelers are mentioned, students who came to study in India. Remember, India was the place that the top students would come to study in. So just like today students flock to Ivy League in America, or they go to Oxford in England, or they go to Australia, India was the place where most of them aspired to send their children to study under the top gurus of India. Their names would be known. Many of the students who came from Western Asia or who came from China to study in India would know the name of the guru under whom they want to study. That was it. And there were very difficult admission tests. So a lot of things that we think they are modern phenomena, like coaching centers, admission tests, the negative marking, all lot of things were actually they have been coming from ancient India, right? So for in the eastern part of India, you can see there are so many universities: Nalanda, Vikramshila, Jagatdala, Telhada. In a lot of them, we have records of very difficult entrance examinations. For Nalanda, only 20% students would be selected, 80% would be eliminated. And there were many villages around Nalanda where coaching centers were teaching students how to crack the admission test in Nalanda. And then we hear about Indonesia, where Chinese students would go to Indonesia because Indonesia was like mini India, and where a lot of disciplines which are taught in India were being also taught there. And so it was like a preparatory stage where they would be spending time in Indonesia, the Chinese students. Like Yijing has mentioned that he spent 1 year in Indonesia, and then he applied for the admission test in Nalanda, and he got through. Because you would need to know Sanskrit, you would need to have a terrific memory for you to clear the admission test. Memory was extremely important. So in the eastern side, you can see the cluster of universities. It also includes Navadvip, Mithila. These are all very important universities, centers of logic, for example. Mithila was a center where, apart from other disciplines, it was very well known for logic, Nyaya Shastra. And in competition to Mithila came Navadvip in Bengal. And ultimately Navadvip became better than Mithila. It attracted better students. Okay? And in the north, we should not forget Sharda Peeth University. Before that, of course, there was Takshashila. The oldest that has been excavated so far is Takshashila. And the modern historians will tell you it was 7th century BC and so on. But our own historians find that it probably could be even thousands of years old. It could even be 2000 BC. So we are still uncovering our own history. Takshashila was one of the oldest. That is where Chanakya, Charaka and all the famous gurus we know, they studied and taught there. Then Sharda Peeth is a university which was in Kashmir. And Kashmir itself was known as Sharda Desh because it was the seat of learning. Sharda was, of course, Sharda is Saraswati, goddess of learning. And so the whole Pradesha was identified with Saraswati, with Sharda. And Sharda Peeth has some of the rarest of manuscripts for which scholars would come from all over India. And we have record of Ramanujacharya traveling from Tamil Nadu all the way to Sharda Peeth in Kashmir because he wants the most authentic manuscripts before he writes his work. Okay? So the Ramanujacharya is known to have travelled. Then Hemachandra was a grammarian in Gujarat, and there is record of him being asked by the king to write a book on grammar, latest book on grammar, write another book. And he said, I want all the old books on grammar that have been written and which are kept in Sharda Peeth. And so copies were requested from Sharda Peeth and they were brought for him. So you are thinking that it's only in today's times that we are traveling to study in different universities. But just go back to thousands of years ago, even then people were making those difficult journeys. They would walk, they would use horses, pack animals, they would come by boat, ship, any way possible to study in a top university of India. They wanted certification from an Indian university. In the southern part of India, can you see how many centers of learning? Many of them were mathas, many of them were temple universities. Different models of learning centers. So mathas, for example, were also places where travelers could stay. Travelers who are passing by a town or city would look for a matha where they could stay for a few nights. And those were also centers of learning, and those were also places where Vaidyas would be available. If you are feeling unwell, you could consult a Vaidya in a matha. Or if your animal is feeling unwell, if you are traveling with horses or any other animal, your cattle, if it's not feeling well, you can take the Vaidya's help in the matha. So imagine, these were multi-purpose institutions in ancient times that were serving many purposes. And then I want to point out Kantalur Shala in Kerala, which was also a very important center of learning. It was called Nalanda of the South. But it actually had more subjects than Nalanda. It even had martial arts. Martial arts was not being taught in Nalanda. But in Kerala's Kantalur Shala, martial arts was an elective. Or maybe it was compulsory, I'm not sure. And we have records of students being warned that you should not wear your arms, you should not carry your weapons to the classroom, because there is a record of students getting into a fight and both of them are carrying weapons. So teachers made these rules that leave your weapons outside before you come for the class. So imagine, I mean, can you imagine a time like that when all these subjects were being taught and students were spoiled for choice about where to go and study, right? We have a record of a father living in Uttar Pradesh, in the Gangetic Plain, and he is saying that I am going to send my son to study in Vallabhi University in Gujarat, because that is a great center of administration. So in Katha Sarit Sagara, there is a mention of a father. He's not sending his son to study in Kashi. He lives in Uttar Pradesh, but he's sending his son to study in Vallabhi, Gujarat. Gujarat had Vallabhi University, again a very reputed university, where they taught administration, governance, and students who graduated from there would get jobs in the government. So he was sending his son to study. And in Ujjain in the center of India was a big center of mathematics. So some of the greatest mathematicians India has produced, Bhaskaracharya, Brahmagupta, they all taught at, and they were also students at Ujjain. And Ujjain had a top-notch observatory. So whoever was the head of that university also had to take care of the observatory. And you know, some of the foundational ideas of mathematics that today we take for granted came from Ujjain. And also, of course, we later on Kerala, we have the Kerala School of Mathematics, which was not a different school of mathematics. They were Aryabhatta's followers, and they took it further. Calculus, differential calculus came from Kerala. So the point that I want to make is that the whole of India was covered by universities, and many of them came up, they were not existing at the same time. They were all existing in different time zones. And sometimes what would happen is that when the invasions happened, that we were invaded, and so the scholars would flee from there, carrying whatever manuscripts they can carry, and they would relocate to another part of India which was safer, and that's how a new center of learning would come. So there is this story of Sri Rangam temple. Sri Rangam temple was another temple university. It was of course a place where people went to worship, but also a place where you could study. Temple universities would have an annex where classes could be held, where discourses could be held, where debates would be held. So the story of this Sri Rangam temple is very touching. So when news came that Ulugh Khan is coming from Delhi to attack this temple, loot the temple. At that time there was a festival going on in Sri Rangam, in Tamil Nadu, and there were some 12,000 ascetics who had assembled over there. And when the news came that they are going to reach in a few hours, that is when the chief priest of the temple was told to carry the image away. They were all prepared. So the main image was being carried away, and a duplicate image was kept ready in readiness in case it's broken. And all the 12,000 sadhus who had assembled there, they were told, do not leave, keep standing here. When the Muslim army comes, all of you have to try to prevent them from entering the temple because they are going to desecrate it. And that's what they did. They all stood there and they all died. And can you believe it that among those 12,000 people, there was also Vedanta Deshika, whose works are very popular today. Now his guru had just composed his work, Sutta Prakashika, I think it is, and he was worried that when the army comes, I'm going to lose this work forever. So he gave it to his student, Vedanta Deshika, and said, protect it with all your life and take it safely, take it to the future generations. And so Vedanta Deshika pretended to be a dead body along with some others. Like among the dead bodies, he was also there, holding on to the manuscripts. And then when the army left, then he took the manuscript from there and he went to Melkote. And that's how Melkote became another center of learning. And he composed many more works, Vedanta Deshika, in honor of his guru who passed away in that attack. So you see how our gurus have protected manuscripts, have protected knowledge, so that we are able to access it today. A lot of sacrifice has gone into it. So this is a picture of Vidyarambha or Hate Khodi, and this shows to you how entrenched education is in our religious ceremonies also. So what you call Vidyarambha, Aksharabhyasa, in Bengal they call it Hate Khodi, and you can see this little girl, the first time she's learning how to write, is being celebrated in a temple during Saraswati Puja. So this is our culture. We had so many milestones, educational milestones, which were linked with our culture, our religious ceremonies. And then of course, Upanayana, which was for entering into higher education. Then we had Samavartana, which was the graduation ceremony. And the Samavartana ceremony is so poignant if you read what all is conducted during. Nowadays nobody does it, Samavartana. Maybe in Gurukulas they will be doing it, but not mainstream. Samavartana is actually far more profound ceremony than the graduation ceremony you have in colleges. Because shlokas are chanted from Taittiriya Upanishad, where the students are told that they have a debt that they owe to the gurus who have taught them, and they must take this knowledge forward. They must be of impeccable character. They must have a mind of their own and not follow blindly. All these things are told during the Samavartana ceremony. So that is how our culture was. Now the most beautiful thing about our culture was that the teacher was the most respected person in society. And some of that culture has come down today also, but in a very watered down form. So in ancient India, the teacher was highly respected because he is giving the foundation of every subject to the students. He is building the character of the students. So the teacher was, the society supported scholars financially, emotionally and personally. And during religious ceremonies, they would invite the scholars to come and have food, have the prasada. And this was very common. And today we are told that, we have to learn from Finland how to respect teachers, how to make the highest paid people are the teachers in Finland, and how we should copy that model. What I tell them is copy our own ancient model. Our own culture is telling us how to treat teachers, right? And so the teachers and the scholars who are devoting their whole lives to education, to study, the society was told to look after them so that they don't have to worry where their food will come from, where their clothes will come from. So imagine Nalanda University was supported by 100 villages, the revenue of 100 villages, right? And similarly, there are inscriptions all over India, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, where you can see the names of the donors who are giving so much gold, so much the grain to the students, and the students who are studying harder subjects will be given more grants, and the students who are studying the basic level will be given a slightly lower scholarship. So all these things, they are documented. So that shows how institutionalized it was in our country. The kings used to donate land to the gurus. So agraharas that you have heard of. Today those agraharas are being broken down and some high-rise buildings are coming. But the name is still agrahara. So you can imagine what those agraharas were. Those were the homes of the teachers. And the students would even go to the homes of the teachers, and the teacher would teach them in the veranda of the house. So all these houses are next to each other. So one guru is teaching one subject in the veranda of his house. In the next house, the guru is teaching another subject, imagine. And sometimes on the street itself, there would be debates, impromptu debates, because they have just come out from one class, they have learned something, and now they are arguing with somebody coming from another class. So this was the ecosystem of learning that India had. Now traveling was a very important part of education. So we have record of those who completed their medical training, the Vaidya, after they became Vaidyas. The Guru would say travel all over India and treat patients in different parts of India and test yourself. So that is the way the education would be given a practical form, because they have learned the theory. Now the medical students would go and treat different patients. So we have the example of Jivaka. Jivaka is mentioned in the Jatakas, and he's mentioned as going around the country. He's curing one king of some ruptured intestines, he's doing surgery. I mean, you can't imagine that they were doing those kind of surgeries in those days. So they did have some kind of anesthesia, they were doing that, intestine surgery, and of course even plastic surgery we hear of during battles, that was also being performed. So the students would travel. And there is another interesting nugget that I would like to share with you about Mithila. So when I was studying Mithila, the Mithila was a big center of learning in Bihar. And I was trying to find out that under whose rule was it, or was all this progress taking place. And I came to know that the first ruler was Nanya Deva, and he went from Karnataka to Mithila. And he started that dynasty, and Karnataka dynasty, and they were big, supporters of education, and that's how Mithila became a big center of education. So I have not been able to understand how come a person from Karnataka goes to Bihar and makes it a big center of learning, but people there are not being forced to learn Kannada. They are all studying Mithila. Maithili is a very beautiful language. So the language was not imposed on them, they were studying the local language. And a Karnataka person has made it a big center of learning. Right? And another beautiful example of mobility is Raja Mayur Varman of Karnataka. He invited hundreds of scholars to come and settle in Karnataka, and they came from Ahit Chhatra is modern day Bareilly in Uttar Pradesh. In fact, my ancestors also came from Ahit Chhatra. So we have that whole family history. There were 60 families that came from Ahit Chhatra, settled in Karnataka, and we are descendants of that. So Mayur Varma wanted all these scholars, experts in different disciplines to come and settle in Karnataka and spread the knowledge over here. Knowledge of grammar, knowledge of etymology, knowledge of conducting yagyas, Samskrita, everything was done. And again, these are people coming from northern India, but they made Kannada literature, they made Kannada progress and come up as a very important language. This was the 4th century. And these scholars who came, hundreds of them, we were in the batch of 60 followers, my ancestors, 60 families. But Raja Mayur Varma invited 300 more scholars in another batch, 400 more, that kind of thing. And they all settled with their families. And they brought up Kannada as a language, can you imagine? So this is the interesting thing, that these migratory movements are happening and the language of that area is being promoted. Now I just wanted to share this slide to show how our gurus were treating even language as a science. So today we have this distinction between humanities and mathematics, and we think science subjects, at least when I was studying, science was praised at this pedestal and languages are less scientists. Language is not science, that is the way we were told. But look at the way our ancestors approached even language as a science. So in English language, for example, we just have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. They're just arranged in some random order. There's no logic, right? But look at our gurus, the way they arrange the alphabets. K, K, G, G, M. It's coming from here. It is the kanthya. It is coming from the throat, right? And then we have ch, ch, j, ch. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Sampadananda ji is listening, and I'm afraid that I might be making mistakes. So you can see that the letters are arranged according to the way they are pronounced. And so we have the murdhanya, ta, ta, da, dha, na, which is coming from higher up further. And dantya, ta, tha, da, dha, na. We are using the teeth to pronounce all of these. Ta, tha. You can say it and feel it, right? And oshtya, where we use the lips to pronounce. So we have pa, pa, ba, bha, ma, right? The last one is the nasal. You have to use the nose to pronounce it. So how scientifically they visualized a language, how the alphabets have to be arranged. And similarly the grammar. Those who have studied Sanskrit grammar know that it is so mathematical. It is just a monument of human intelligence. It has been devised so well, right? So that is the way. And when the British colonized us, they were also fascinated by our grammar. And when they learned the similarity between their languages and our languages, that is when the whole subject of modern linguistics developed. When the Europeans in the 18th century came in contact with Sanskrit and came into contact with Indian languages, that is when linguistics developed, and they started studying their own languages also as a science. They tried to make rules, they tried to make their grammar more scientific. Now, an interesting thing that we may not know because we have come so far is that you or most of us know that India gave 0 to the world, India gave the decimal system to the world. But today it seems very obvious that, okay, numbers are represented by using any number. Any number can be represented by the decimal system. Just from 0 to 9, you can represent all numbers. But this was not so obvious. This was not so obvious even in the 13th century, even in the 14th century. And if you go back and see the history of mathematics, the Europeans rejected the decimal system for quite some time. Christian Europe. And then slowly some of them started seeing the logic behind using the decimal system. Because they had the Roman system. As you know, the Roman system, the way we use alphabets to represent the numbers. And can you imagine a number like 3,898, how it was written in Roman numbers? It was written like that, M, 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 D, C, C, C. So they had to invent newer and newer symbols in order to represent the numbers, right? So L represented 50. And the way they wrote the numbers was, it was additive, right? X means 20, so 10 plus 10. So they cannot imagine anything other than an additive way of writing the number. It was like that. And the largest number was M for myriad, which is 10,000, not 1,000, that's wrong, it's 10,000. So M was 10,000 and they had no number higher than that, right? Whereas look at the way we thought about it. Even in Rig Veda contains the terms for the 9 primary numbers. And Rig Veda is the oldest text that we have today, right? And by Aryabhata's time, zero and decimal system were used not just by scholars but by everybody. So, when Indian knowledge, Indian numbers they first went to the Arabic world. They went to Baghdad, where the Khalifas were ruling. At that time, Islam was still new, and they were accepting of all this knowledge coming from India. A lot of Indian scholars used to be asked to visit Baghdad and settle down there permanently. So that is how the Indian number system, the Indian works of mathematics, they were all translated into Arabic and Persian. Okay, and they had lot of respect for Brahmagupta, Bhaskaracharya. If you see the translated works, they are very, very thankful. But Brahmasputa Siddhanta was a bestseller. I mean, the way it was copied and translated, it was so popular in the Arab world, right? But again, they rejected the negative numbers. They took mathematics knowledge, but they said, what is this negative numbers? We don't want to. It looks evil. We don't want to deal with it. So they also had their reservations. And this is an interesting cartoon, which is showing to you the big fight which took place between the Algoris and the Abacus. So in Europe, what happened is, the way they were doing big calculations was using abacus. I think you know abacus. You have the beads which can be moved on a counter, on a rod, right? And so for them to do fast calculations, they were having abacus who used to quickly move the beads and quickly do the calculation and give the number. And they thought that is the best way to do calculations. Now when the Indian knowledge of numbers and decimal system came, then Algoris, that's how the word Algoris, now that's because Al-Khwarizmi, when he translated the mathematics of India, that's how the word Algor came, because he's the one who did it. The Latin people started calling it as algorithm. Algorithm also has come from that. So there was this competition between the scholar who has learned the Indian mathematics, and he's calculating without using any physical thing. He's just calculating in his mind and using the paper and pencil, and he's giving the result. And on the right side you can see the abacus who is giving the result. So there was quite a fight between these two groups, and eventually they realized that the fastest way to do calculation is by using the decimal system, and that is how slowly more and more Europeans started using the decimal system. So don't think that it was that easy. And today, when we do it, we don't even feel it, right? We feel this is the way math should be done, and we don't realize that there was a time when they thought, what is this nonsense? How can you do addition like this? Like, how can you write 51 and it doesn't mean 6? Because in the Roman method, if you wrote 51, 5-1, it meant 6. It didn't mean 50 plus 1, right? So this whole change in the mindset, and till today we are using the same number system. Nothing has changed. And I sometimes believe that this level of innovation that we had in India, where we gave a whole new way of looking at numbers, we have not come to that level of innovation now. We have lost that kind of thinking. We are all set in our way of thinking. We cannot think in that way again, Now, games were also used as educational aids. It was not just that in these universities they are teaching some subject and there is a classroom, so that is the only way in which knowledge was imparted. So we had many games, and those games were used to teach different things. Like this game of snakes and ladders was teaching values. So it was not a game of numbers. It wasn't like you landed on a number like 8, then you climbed the ladder, you went up. It was not random. So the way we played it in India, it was called Mokshapatam. It had various other names, Gyan Chaupar. And each of the squares had some virtue or a vice. So, Moha, Ahankara. If you landed on a square with Ahankara, then you would go down the snake. And if you landed on a square with Satya, Dharma, then you would go up a ladder to a higher number. And the last square would be Moksha, would be Vaikuntha or whatever. So this is the way children would be playing these games, and without any lecturing to them, they would already know that this is a virtue, this is a vice. So I should follow Satya. If I follow Satya, if I follow Dharma, then I'll reach a higher level, right? And similar, there were other games like chess. You know that chess, Chaturanga came from India. And chess was used to teach strategy. And it was compulsory for all the people of the royal family, girls and boys, they all had to be experts in chess. Because you had to know how to think 10 moves ahead, 20 moves ahead. That was the way strategy was taught. Then playing cards with all those different colors, they were used to educate. They were used to teach permutation, combination, and variety of things. Card games were so popular in India, and in a fun way, children would learn numbers, they would learn colors, they would learn so many things. Because if you see the old-time cards, playing cards, there are a lot of writing on it. There would be something written on it which is informative. Stories were also used as educational aids. I don't think I need to tell anyone about Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas. We all know how stories were used to teach, right? And then, the Panchatantra is the most famous example of stories that are teaching you a very important Shastra actually, Niti Shastra. So, these stories were actually teaching you something very profound. When as children they would learn the stories, but they would not know that they're learning Niti Shastra. They would just be told different things like you can't trust everybody. If you treat your servant badly, tomorrow your servant will bring your downfall. All those stories are there in Panchatantra. And when a serious student would further pursue Niti Shastra at higher levels, Artha Shastra, Niti Shastra, then the student would realize that I already learned these stories in Panchatantra which were teaching the same thing. So in this way, can you see the pedagogy? They're actually teaching children the principles of higher knowledge already in a very digestible way at a young age, and then at a later age the same knowledge is the theory is given to you. So this is the way knowledge was taught. It was given in a graded manner. Then we had a culture of debate. This is just so part of Indian society. This is so characteristic of India that even today they say that if there are 2 people or 3 people, there will be like 5 viewpoints. So this is coming from ancient India, where we were all free to discuss, we were all free to oppose, right? So there was this culture of debate. The spirit of rational inquiry was well developed. Physical phenomena were observed closely, and the rules of logic were applied to know. So if there is a beautiful sunrise, there is a sunset, they would try to analyze why is the sun there in that position, and where does it go, and does it really go down, or are we moving? All these things were used. So Tarka Vidya was the Shastra used, and then we had such an elaborate system of evidence. What is good evidence, bad evidence, Pramana Shastra, right? And the reason why we have so many sampradayas today in India, right? This pluralism that we have Dvaita, Advaita, and I don't know how many other philosophies. We have Jains, we have Buddhists, we have the Charvakas. All this is because of the culture of debate. So there would be people who would debate and they would break apart and say, I don't agree with your view, and then they would form their own school of philosophy. Then they would break into some smaller group and they would form their own group, school of philosophy. So this was the culture of the time. And we find evidence of debates in all the Shastras, all the Itihasas also, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Skanda Purana, all the Puranas also you will find evidence of Tarka Shastra. And it was also presented like a tournament. There would be debate tournaments organized by the kings, where all the scholars of the land would be invited. Come and show your skills in front of the people of this land. And in this manner, in the manner of the gladiator tournaments we hear about in Rome and in the European countries, ancient Europe. But in India, that was also there. We had skills of warfare and all that fighting, which was performed in a tournament. But we also had debate tournaments. And in those debate tournaments, there would be rules about who will be disqualified if you shift the goalpost, or if you talk nonsense, if you're not pertinent. So these rules were there, and there would be a judge. So we have very famous debates, like Adi Shankara versus Mandana Mishra, and the judge was a lady. So there, when people say that women were not into education, we have examples of ladies being the judges of debates. They were so knowledgeable. And so the winners of tournaments, we also have this example of the winner of a debate tournament was taken in a ratha, in a chariot around the city, for everybody to see and for everybody to know that this is the role model for us. The one who speaks in such a beautiful way, his language is so good, this is the way he dresses. So in this way, role models were introduced to the society. I have this slide on memory training because I have a whole chapter in my book on the importance of memory training, which I think we are devaluing quite a bit, because today, because our education was degraded, and then we went into rote learning, and that's how we forgot, we now don't know what actually memory was used for. So the way it was is that people would remember entire books in their mind in the ancient times. They would remember Ashtadhyayi completely, they would remember Amarkosha. And remember, when children are young, they have the capacity to remember a lot, and that is the time they would start making them remember. And today, you know how degraded you are when you think about what are you able to remember. How many phone numbers can you remember? Like do you even remember more than 4 or 5 mobile phone numbers, right? You think everything is in Google, I can Google it, or it's in my hard disk. But we don't bother to keep it in our brain, and that's really going down. The cognition also goes down when your memory goes down. So there were some famous research studies done, like the Sanskrit effect. It was done by an Italian researcher, where he studied the brains of all these Veda mantra chanters, and found that the part of the brain which deals with cognition has expanded in size as they progressed in their Veda learning. And you know how cognition is so important, right? When you see something, to analyze what is happening around you, the more you remember, the better you will be able to analyze. If you don't remember anything, you just look at something, you will not see the pattern, you will not analyze it well enough. And the clues of this kind of memory, you can see it in the Veda learning, the Veda Patha. If you go to a Veda Pathshala and see how they are learning the Veda, it is not just by simply repeating the same thing again and again. They have different ways of chanting, right? So they have the Samhita Patha, the Pada Patha, they have the Krama Patha, Jata Patha. All these are different ways. So there's, if you imagine A, B, C, D are different words, A, B, C, D, F, G until Z. So, the Krama Patha would be A, B, B, C, C, D. This is the way they would chant it several times. Jata Patha would be A, B, B, A, B, B, C, C, D, B, C, C, D, and so on. And finally, students would graduate to Ghana Patha, which is the most difficult pattern of chanting, where you have A, B, the last line, A, B, B, A, B, C, C, B, A, B, C, B, C. So in this way, they're chanting the Vedas in different ways, 11 different ways, so that they will never forget it. So instead of repeating in a straight line, in a linear way, there will be a non-linear way of memorizing, and that is how their memories were phenomenal. It has been reported by so many students who came to study in India. I think I Ching has written about the extraordinary memory of the Brahmanas. And then the British observed that not just the Brahmanas, but ordinary people like the Dhobi, the washerman or washerwoman, remembers where the clothes have been taken from. There might be 30, 40 houses from where clothes have been taken for washing, and there is never a mistake by returning the clothes. Same thing with pharmacists. The British have noted that, where all the medicines, hundreds of medicines are in that shop, and you ask for that medicine, the pharmacist knows exactly where it is and gives it to you in 1 minute. So he has a picture memory in his mind. So they were very fascinated by India's memory, and I feel that we should explore this and see how we can bring this back in our education. There was no artificial divide between religion and science. So like today we have all these humanities and science, I mentioned to you, there was no artificial divide. So because the priests, the Purohits or the Veda followers, when they were doing the Homa, the Yajna, they had to make perfect squares, they had to make rectangles, they had to make circles, right? Geometrical shapes. So that is how the rules of geometry came about. Then they needed the exact time of performing a yajna. So they would need to know the position of the stars and the moon and the planets, and that is how astronomy developed to such an extent. So you will be surprised to know that the greatest mathematicians would be the people who are performing the yajna, right? And today we see them as backward people. They don't know much about anything, and we are the modern people. So that's because during the British period, all these subjects were divided. They were degraded. Remember, in Europe, science had to fight with religion in order to be independent. So only in the age of enlightenment, the Western world could become free of religion and focus on mathematics and knowledge, right? So I often talk about civilizational pride. This is something that is lacking in students today. They study all these subjects, but do they have civilizational pride? And for that to happen, we have to connect to our educational heritage. We have to know about what we did. We don't have to manufacture any pride. If we just go back to our history and see what all our gurus did, what all the knowledge they brought to the fore, pride will come automatically. Now there are other countries where they're actually manufacturing pride by giving them this icon, this is, and their history is hardly 100 years old, 200 years old, but they have to manufacture that kind of pride. Whereas in India, we just have to go back and look at our history and the pride comes naturally. And I think pride is very important, justified pride, because it gives you confidence, it gives you that self-esteem. You stand tall among the people, and today it's very needed when we are being told that we are backward, we haven't, we have learned everything from the West. I also want to make a point about Kala-based education. So in ancient India, today's mainstream education, we don't have very much importance given to the arts. And arts is again, it's like below sciences. But in ancient India, the cultured people were ones who also were proficient in the arts. So you might have heard of the 64 arts, the 64 Kala as they say in Hindi. And that included dancing, painting, music, and it even included architecture, cooking, designing, interior decoration, even chemistry. It even included metallurgy. So there were so many of these, they were considered arts, right? So they didn't make those distinctions. So a cultured person, urban person would know a lot of arts along with knowing the hard sciences, along with the itihasas and so on. So we have the example of Bhaskaracharya, one of the greatest mathematicians we ever had, and he was very, very proficient in poetry. And when you read his works, you will find that everything has been expressed very poetically. So you can study it only for its poetry, even if you don't want to study it for math, right? And his Leelavati, his text Leelavati on arithmetic and algebra, has problems which are set in poetry, poetic form, poetic meters, and in fact it addresses a female. It is addressing a female and saying, "Oh, beautiful one, can you solve this problem?" And then, so that also shows to you that women were studying mathematics. Right? I think that being embedded in arts, it gives you a whole different viewpoint. It gives you the Saundarya Drishti. So when you are embedded in arts, so even you might become a space engineer, but if you're well versed in the arts, it makes you create things of beauty, and that is missing in our education today. I had this picture of ancient versus modern education because when I was traveling in Gujarat, I was seeing the beautiful step wells. Look at this. This has also been constructed by an engineer. So engineers of ancient times were not only making functional structures, but they were also making them beautiful. Beautiful carvings would be there. Even if they didn't make it themselves, they would get the artisans to make it. But this is the way they conceptualized a well. And today, look at the tube wells that we build. They're just, they're holes in the ground with a pump and a pipe. So this is what? The Saundarya Drishti is thrown out of the window when we learn all these sciences. And that is the difference between ancient education and today's, apart from many other things. I want to make a case for being rooted. Our education should help us to be rooted because it helps us to become more authentic. When we become authentic, when we are true to ourselves, when we know our true nature, our true culture, our sabhyata, we become more relaxed, we become more comfortable because we are not trying to speak with an accent, we are not trying to dress in something which is not our way of dressing, right? So I always tell young people when I meet young Indians that when you connect your heritage, you are going to become the most authentic version of yourself. And that's going to help you in many ways, like in your relationships with your family members, with your colleagues. Nobody likes a fake person. Nobody wants to deal with somebody who's putting on an accent and pretending to be very concerned, very kind. But you can make out this person is not authentic. So when you connect your own shastras, your own culture, you will become very natural and the true version of yourself. I love to give this example of Sridhar Vembu, the founder of Zoho Corporation. So just like many of us, he went to America, he studied in America, and then one day he got this realization that he wants to connect to his roots, and he came back to Tamil Nadu, and he leads a very authentic lifestyle now. He uses a bicycle, and for his company now he's training the rural people, programming, he's teaching them things he's bypassing the education system, which is going to take them away from their culture. He's letting them stay in their own village, and he's teaching them whatever is needed to work in his company. A lot of them are working there. He has his conferences in open air. The conference room is airy, and he talks to. He also has virtual connections as well. And in the morning he goes for a walk. He swims in the local pond, and he's leading that lifestyle. So this goes to show that people say, oh, how can you be authentic and be studying in the gurukulas and then be successful? Well, actually you can be. The new model that is now coming out will help. Will ensure that even those who are studying in the indigenous way can also be integrated into society. That can happen. I love to give this quote all the time. If you don't know history, then you don't know anything. You are a leaf that doesn't know it is part of a tree. So a lot of us think that history is not important. We don't need to know our past. We need to move to the future. A lot of time I'm told, what will we do learning about the glory of ancient India? And I tell them, then you will know that you are part of a tree. And then you will take advantage of that tree, the roots, right? The new discourse of decoloniality. This is something that is for some reason not taken off in India, but in the America, the Native Americans, and in Africa, the Africans, or also the Africans in America, they're all talking about decolonization. It's a whole discipline, because we have all been colonized and we have lost our drishti. We don't think with our own original mindset. So we have been programmed. And decoloniality challenges European universalism. It rejects the notion that we must look at the world from the European perspective. So we should try and look at things from our own lenses. And for that, it is important to connect with our own educational heritage. Some of us might be familiar with the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery was an actual doctrine which came from Christian Europe, where they said that unless something has been discovered by a European, it has really not been discovered. Okay? And it applied to land also. If the land has been taken up by a European, then it belongs to that European. Whoever lived there before, they have no rights over it. And the same thing was applied to knowledge, right? So, Newton, Leibniz, Dalton, all these European scientists and astronomers, mathematicians, whatever they came out with, the principles that they enunciated, they were named after them, because now it's a European who has discovered it. And that is why it is important to get into this decoloniality discourse. It is simply senseless, right, to call it Pythagorean theorem when we ourselves were using exactly that when in Bodhayanas, Shulva Sutras, and there are many other Shulva Sutras where you see exactly the same theorem is being applied to make the squares and rectangles, right? And in so many other grammar, everything that our Shastras were already talking about and we were studying, they are now all incorporated into the European Western sciences, and you have to always cite their names as the inventors, as the discoverers. So we have to fight that. And why we have to do that, I have some reasons for that. Like, we are losing our terminology because of deracination, because of this mental colonization. We are losing the terms that were once part of our vocabulary. An example of that is this non-sleep depressed, NSDR, which is now such a commonly used term that I saw Sundar Pichai of Google, the CEO. He was recommending to people that if you do not get sleep, if you are suffering from insomnia, then please see the videos of NSDR, non-sleep depressed, which is nothing but Yoga Nidra. So you see how our terms have now been taken over and they are now called by a different name, and there is a patent around that, and the person who discovered it, he is being lauded because he discovered this technique, right? Alternate nostril breathing is pranayama. So pranayama, what we call pranayama, we all know the efficacy of pranayama, is now being projected as alternate nostril breathing. So when we are not connected to our own roots, we will just accept these terms. A lot of people accept, even Indians, they accept these terms and think, yeah, great, I am doing alternate nostril breathing. Uthak Baithak. Now this is one thing that you might have seen naughty children in schools. They were being punished by the teacher to hold their ears like this and go up and down, right? Now that is being called super brain yoga. They have done a study on it, and they found that if you do it 20, 30 times or 100 times, it makes your brain relaxed, and a hyperactive kid can actually become very sober after doing this Uthak Baithak. I think it is called Toppu Karanam in Tamil. So you see, because we didn't give attention to all this, we just took it for granted. the Western world is mining these concepts and presenting it as something new. Right? Even Jalneti, by the way, Jalneti that we do for unblocking our nostrils, it's called Neti pot and it's being patented. It's available in US pharmacies. And there's no mention of India. Nobody knows it has come from India. They think it is some nice method of clearing up your nostrils. The systems approach is nothing but the Purusha approach. We just accept a systems approach as some new concept that came from the West. But if you look at it, we had the Purusha approach, where we would look at everything as an organism, interconnected body, where every part of the body is contributing to the system. So we had temples, the structure of a temple is like a Purusha, like a body of the cosmic human being. Everything, even the structure of society was like a human body, right? The Varna system. So that is nothing but Purusha approach, which is the systems approach. Then this one water approach is something I heard when I was a water journalist, and I had gone to a conference where they launched the one water approach, and they explained to everybody that the same water that we drink is the water drunk by the animals and needed by the plants, and the water that should keep flowing in the river for the river's needs. So we should think of all this and we should call it one water. It's not just for human beings. And I remember standing up in the audience and asking the expert on the stage, this is a very old concept, why are you introducing it as a new concept? What is this one water? We had it in India, where we looked at everything as an interconnected organism, and we are not to exploit nature. So he said that, you didn't give the terms for it, now we are giving the terms for it. So see, when we were napping, when we were sleeping, all these terminologies were taken up by the West. This is a very important infographic which shows to you how India started a knowledge revolution, how Indian knowledge went to the rest of the world, and this is the longest chapter in my book, in which I have talked about how Indian knowledge of Sanskrit, of grammar, even the Hippocratic oath that we say, the doctors who take that oath, Hippocratic oath, you will find that Charaka's oath is already there. Shapat, the Charaka's Shapat is exactly the same thing, and it's even more. It is even more profound than the Hippocratic oath. So practically everything has gone from India, and that's why I've shown India as a lamp, the lamp of knowledge. So Indian knowledge went to Greece and Egypt, the knowledge of medicine, Charaka's oath, concepts of sentience of animals. For example, the fact that animals also have an Atma. This concept went from India to the rest of the world. Before that, the Christians used to believe that animals are just things. They don't have feelings. So it's perfectly all right to kill them and eat them. They don't have feelings. And then came when Pythagoras got acquainted with Indian knowledge systems, and then he is telling them all that, hey, listen, animals can also feel, and we can be reborn as animals. All those things, all those concepts went from India. Metallurgy, chemistry, biology. There is just so much that Indian knowledge has given to the world, and that is by way of translations that it reached the rest of the world. There was a translation revolution in the 13th and 14th century, whereby Indian Shastras were translated into Arabic, Persian, and later on when the Christian world occupied the Islamic territories, they took their books and translated them into Latin. So in Spain there was a place called Toledo where a large amount of translation happened, and it was like a gold mine that they had found, all these texts. Because remember, in Christians also there were people who are very interested in knowledge, and so when they saw these texts they wanted to get them translated. And that's how what happened is the name of Indians got excluded in that. The Arabs, when they translated our works to Arabic, they gave credit to India. So you will find in the names of the books, Hind is mentioned in the names. But when they were translated to Latin, then Arabs were credited sometimes, or sometimes the translator would take credit for it, or whoever decoded it would take the credit for it, and India got excluded. Indian knowledge got erased. So even today we have to strongly argue and convince them that, look, we were already using these concepts, this has come from us, and they are very skeptical because it's the doctrine of discovery, which is well established. Even in Southeast Asia, Japan, China, so many scholars came from India, came from China and settled in India, and so many Indian scholars were invited by Chinese kings to settle there and translate from Sanskrit to Chinese. And this was a very hard exercise because Chinese grammar is not as developed as Indian, and there are no words to translate. So our scholars had to do a lot of work to first develop their grammar and then develop the words, and that's how we must also give credit to the Chinese, because our scholars were given palaces to live in when they did the translation. Right? So we have dozens and dozens of texts, hundreds of texts. So Zhuangzang took about 600 texts from India. Fahian took I think 300, 400. So they all used to compete with each other to carry maximum manuscripts from India and then get them translated. In their lifetime, maybe they would translate just 20-30% of what they carried, but the rest were kept over there. And I often say that maybe many of us should learn Chinese so that we can go to China and see what is available there. Right? Of course, the original manuscripts as well as the translated ones, which we have lost in India. So knowing your heritage helps to connect the dots. And I can give an example of 108. When we hear about 108 times of japa has to be done, 108 Surya Namaskaras we have to do, we don't think about why are we doing it 108 times. And in fact, it's dismissed as superstition by many people. So when you go deeper into your shastras and deeper into your knowledge systems, you will find the connections coming out. So 108 is the ratio of the diameter of the sun and diameter of the earth. So the sun is 108 times the diameter of the earth. The distance between the earth and sun is 108 times the diameter of the sun. The distance between the earth and the moon is 108 times the moon's diameter. So you can see that our ancestors saw 108 as a magic number. It is coming again and again. And if the distance between the sun and the earth was any different from what it is now, there would be no life on earth. Distance between the earth and the moon, if it was different, there will be catastrophe. So this 108, they realized the significance of this, and that's how we have it in our chants, the japas, the Surya Namaskaras. So sometimes when we dismiss something as superstition, I think we should step back and try to see where it has come from, and it might lead you to something very profound, a very profound aspect of Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. So I think reconnecting with ancient knowledge might help us in solving many of today's challenges. And it is relevant today. A lot of people think that knowledge may not be relevant for today, but I think it is. I showed you how the terminologies are coming from our shastras. There are so many things we can do with them. We have the example of Manjul Bhargava, the one who won the highest medal in mathematics, the Fields Medal, and he attributes it to the Indian knowledge systems. He won it in I think 2017, and he recounted how he used to go home in the summer holidays. He used to live in the US. He's from Princeton. He graduated from Princeton. So he used to go home to Jaipur in the summer holidays, and he learned Sanskrit from his grandfather. He started going through the works of Brahmagupta, Pingala, and so he came up with this unique way of proving Gauss's law on binary quadratic forms. So he was very inspired by the works of Pingala, Hemachandra, and then he saw the elegant way in which proofs are given in Indian mathematics. And then he also, I think, combined it with the Rubik's Cube, and then he came up with this solution of Gauss's law, which used to take, I think, 30 pages to prove. He made it in a few lines. He brought it down in the Indian way, the sutra way of giving proofs. So I think, using ancient knowledge, there is Manjul Bhargava who won the highest medal in mathematics. So we simply cannot say that ancient Indian knowledge is not relevant today. It is. We have Ayurvedic concoctions which are being patented today, which are being reused in a different way. Yoga is being repurposed to treat diseases. There is potential in agriculture, water management, sanitation, architecture, construction, cooking, nutrition, textiles, entertainment. Even entertainment has a lot to take from our shastras. The Natya Shastras, if it is studied properly, then our filmmakers, I think, will be able to make much more beautiful films. Today, when you see the films that are being made, you can see that they don't have any knowledge of rasa, bhava. They're just making just whatever comes to their head. And there's often a lot of ugliness in them. So I think we all can, whatever discipline we are in, we can try to mine our shastras and see how to make it relevant. The other thing is about solving today's problems. I like to quote Albert Einstein, who said that you cannot solve problems with the same thinking used to create the problems. Right? You cannot use the same mindset which created those problems. And today if you see problems, the problems of today, they are like climate change, global warming, psychological problems, right? Fraud, family breaking up, so many problems, garbage generation, heavy footprint, environmental footprint. So all these problems did not come from the Bharatiya Drishti. They didn't come from our Guru's way of looking at things. So that's why if we connect to our own Bharatiya Drishti via the Indian knowledge systems, we will probably find a solution for today's problems. The traditional Indic approach is always holistic. Before even these words called interdisciplinary came, integrated came, we have always been thinking in an integrated way. There is no Ayurvedic doctor who will only treat you for your eye infection or for your stomach problem. He will look at the whole body. And it's like that with every discipline. There was no subject of environmental sciences in ancient India, because environment was part of every discipline. Every engineer who constructed would think about how his structure is going to impact the fish, the birds, the animals. That's the way they constructed. I should wrap up, okay. I will then skip this concept of brahmacharya. Just wanted to talk about how brahmacharya was an essential part of Indian education, and today it is not being taught at all, because nobody is explaining to the students or teaching them the techniques of self-control. Because brahmacharya, that is the years of studenthood, is the period when your moral compass has to be built very strongly, so that later in life, when anything comes your way, you're able to make the right decision. You will know what is dharma, what is adharma. And also if there is a crisis, somebody passes away, somebody dies, your girlfriend deserts you, your boyfriend is unfaithful to you. People get into depression today. Students get into depression and all these things happen. But if brahmacharya had been inculcated in their student days, then those would not be a problem. They would know it's not the end of the world. They know they can look at the holistic, everything in a holistic manner, and they know that we can move on, we will overcome this crisis, right? So I always like to talk about brahmacharya to young people. So our educational heritage makes us very unique. This is another thing I like to tell the Indian students in America, because they want to know the practical use of being rooted. So I tell them that, look, you are all writing college essays. In order to be selected in different top colleges, you have to write an essay. And the selectors are trying to find out what is unique about you. But the problem is that today everybody is like each other. So most of the urban people are wearing jeans, they are eating pizza, they are watching Hollywood movies, taking selfies, writing Instagram posts. How will the selectors distinguish between all these students and their achievements? So this is where I feel that if you have a Bharatiya Drishti, if you strengthen your Bharatiya Drishti, you will be writing in your own unique way. Because Bharatiya Drishti is not about sameness, it is all about bringing out your original way of living, thinking, your original way of, your real gunas come out by connecting to your knowledge systems. So knowledge of Mahabharata, Artha Shastra, Nyaya Shastra, they make us unique in the global context. So I think that is the last slide. I think I had one on my contact details. It's not there. Not there? Here it is. So thank you very much for listening to me, and if you have any questions, my email is here and my book is there available outside. It has more details of everything that I told you. Thank you very much.